Well, good afternoon. So I'm about to introduce to you how restaurants can be innovative in a community as a restaurateur standing between you and lunch. So I'm going to tell you a story how I saw this at work. So Doug was kind enough to host a meeting, and a gentleman by the name of Chase Koch was at that meeting, and he talked about a concept in Dallas, Texas called Café Momentum. And he talked about how that had justice involved youth as an employee base. And Bob Shermer who's here today, the CEO of Meritage Hospitality. They have a lot of restaurants. After that meeting, we said, well, maybe we could do something like that. We thought about justice involved youth, kids, fire, knives, what could go wrong? So we got together and thought about how our community is such a great community for something like that. And we took a trip down to Dallas, and we got to see Café Momentum working firsthand, and it was amazing. During the day, kids were in a high school setting in the restaurant, working on high school work, working on their high school diplomas. Social workers, teachers, support all around them. Some kids were interested in learning, maybe not so much like I wasn't in high school, went both ways. But then at 4 o'clock, the restaurant opened. So it was a full service restaurant, amazing food, and the kids learned work ethic and life skills, integrity, teamwork, how to do all the things in a restaurant to make it work. And I've seen restaurants work my whole life, and I was just blown away by the work that had been done at Café Momentum to not only have a really amazing restaurant with great food, great concept, but the mission and the purpose behind it in a different way of contributing to community through a restaurant. And the visionary for that is Chef Chad Hauser, who's here with us today. So I'd like to welcome him to the stage. We can learn a little bit more about Chef Chad Hauser and Café Momentum and how restaurants can innovate in our community as well. Chef Chad.
The current approach to juvenile justice is the definition of insanity, trying the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Our approach completely changes the paradigm of juvenile justice. When the kids come in, we tell them, I love you and I believe in you. That sends a direct message that they carry with them for the rest of their lives.
All right, I love you. Go get ready for dinner. Have a good shift.
How you guys doing today? This is a 12-month paid internship for juveniles who are just not coming out the Juvenile Justice Center. Helps them get a job, stay on their feet, and keep them out the Juvenile Justice Center. So I thank you guys so much for coming out and supporting us.
We're incredibly proud to be ranked the third best restaurant in Dallas because it proves that these young men and young ladies can and will rise to whatever level of expectation is set for them. You can literally see the transformation happen, and it really all starts with just one person saying, I believe in you.
All right. I feel you, Johnny. I end up in this spot every single time. I'm the last person to speak before food. I don't know if that's metaphoric or just symbolically temporal. But it's not lost on me that I'm a man of few words. It just takes a lot of words to get to those few words. But I'll try to go as fast as possible. I think to understand the story of Café Momentum, we have to go back. I love talking about entrepreneurs and entrepreneurialism. But 17 years ago, I didn't know what that was or what that meant. But it was a journey. And I think that if you hear the story of any entrepreneur, it's the journey. And it's never a perfect journey, and it's certainly not a linear journey. My story started 18 years ago. Chef and restaurateur, 18 years ago, 2007, I sold my house. I took all the equity out of it. I took out a loan, and I bought into a restaurant in Dallas, Texas. I fulfilled my career goals to be chef, owner of a restaurant. I'm going to start that sentence back over and say, in 2007, I took everything I owned as a single dad of a tween daughter and invested it into the incredibly stable industry that is food service and hospitality. It was right at the 1-year mark of co-ownership that I went from thinking that I was a risk-taking fool to thinking I was a risk-taking genius. It was at that first year of co-ownership that I not only grew the business by almost 40% in spite of a recession, in spite of watching restaurants all around us close. I was also nominated as best up-and-coming chef in Dallas. And I thought, you are a risk-taking genius, my friend. You should sign leases on every single one of these defunct restaurants and build your empire. But it was right at that 1-year mark of co-ownership that I was volunteered, some would say voluntold, that I was going to teach 8 young men in a juvenile detention facility to make ice cream for an ice cream competition at the Dallas Farmers Market. And it was the moment that I walked into that detention facility that I felt arguably the greatest sense of shame I've ever felt in my entire life. Because the moment I walked in there, I realized immediately that I had stereotyped and labeled these 8 young men. And it wasn't just that I was wrong. It's that I thought I was a better human being. But when confronted with the reality, literally face to face, I was wrong. I spent 3.5 hours that day with 8 young men making ice cream. I spent 3.5 hours that day with 8 young men teaching me who they were, how they were, why they were. 2 days later, they're bussed down to the farmer's market. And if you could just close your eyes and visualize just for a minute that you have about a dozen college culinary students in chef pants, chef coats. Some of them had those stupid tall hats. And then you had 8 young men in jail clothes. Children in jail clothes. And yet those 8 young men stood with their chests puffed, smiling from ear to ear, proud, oozing out of every orifice in their body. And at the end of the competition, one of the young men won the whole thing. And when he won, he said to me, "Sir, I just love to make food and give it to people and put a smile on their face." I challenge every single person in this room to tell me a more beautiful way you've heard a human being describe their heart. He said, "When I get out, I'm going to get a job in a restaurant." And he, of course, solicited my professional chef advice on whether he should work at Wendy's or Chili's. Heeding the advice of my father, I professionally told him, whoever hires you first and whoever pays you the most money second. But then I went home, and he went to jail. And it was the drive home that started the hamster wheel in my head going fast and nonstop. And the first place I went was the acknowledgement, understanding that he was never going to make it to a Wendy's or Chili's. I knew his story. He's going to go back to the same house, the same street, the same route. All the things that had pushed him in a path of detention to begin with. I heard a man describe the young people we work with one time as saying, sometimes it's not the choices people make, it's the choices they're given. And I've never heard a more accurate description, explanation of young people tied up in the juvenile justice system. But I continued to dig deeper. I continued to process, I continued to think, and it pushed me on a place of thinking of myself at 16 years old versus him at 16 years old. And when I was 16, I was given so many chances in life, so many opportunities to succeed and to fail and to try again as many times as it took until I got it right. And yet this young man was given one chance to show the world what he was capable of when given access and opportunity to walk in his greatness, and it wasn't even going to land him a job at Wendy's or Chili's. It was an acknowledgement for me that for both of us, our lives had been dictated by choices that were made for us before we were born. Because of the color of our skin, the socioeconomic class we were born in, the part of town that we were born in, education, food, healthcare, all of these resources that one of us was provided an abundance of, and the other a depravity. And it was acknowledgement for me that if this is the way the world works, I don't want to be a part of it. And so I went and volunteered more time in the detention facility, and I listened. And what I heard was a staff talking about consistency and stability, and what I heard was young men talking about attempting to access consistency and stability that landed them in a system that said, you're never going to leave. And I'm not just making that up. Data across the country says 60 to 80% of adult prisoners in this country started off with a record when they were 12 or 13 years old. It's a system that says, when they release you, I'll see you soon. So that's where the idea for Café Momentum came about. Is how do I take what I know and what I can do and apply it to create a space for these young people that provides the consistency and stability that they're asking and seeking in their life so that they can achieve their full potential. So you can imagine my enthusiasm as I traipsed around the city of Dallas telling anyone that would listen, I have a new restaurant concept. It's going to be a nonprofit restaurant. I'm going to take kids out of jail. I'm going to teach them to play with knives and fire. Nothing can go wrong. The thing that people fixated on first and foremost was, but aren't all restaurants nonprofit? And I said, well, at least you know I've got an extensive resume, so where do you sign over that first donation? But then people would start to say things to me like, so let's just be real. What are you going to do when the kids stab each other in the kitchen? Those kids don't want to work. They just want to collect a check. Those kids have never been to a nice restaurant. They can't cook your food. They were saying this about children. And I remember thinking to myself, forget everything else that I thought, planned, plotted, and just acknowledge that if this is what the world tells these children that they are, then they are living the self-fulfilled prophecy of who the world says they are and not who they were born to be. And if you ever met any single one of these young people, you would never, not on your worst day, would you ever say that about them. So I devised a plan to make it happen. I said, we're going to launch pop-up dinners. The idea was really simple. Go in one of the top restaurants in Dallas on a Sunday night when they're closed. We'll sell tickets to a private dinner. Chef writes a 4-course menu, and the staff working alongside the chef in the kitchen and serving to the level and quality of service of that restaurant were 8 young people that we would bus in from a detention facility for the evening. The goal for the first dinner, June 2011, get 50 people to pay $50. I was so desperate to have people show up that I had devised a plan to call my mom and have her guilt the ladies in her Bible study class into buying tickets. Because I was like, that's 10 ladies that need salvation and they got to put up $50 to earn it. The dinner sold out in 24 hours and every single person that walked through the doors, walked out of those doors, they looked me in the eye and they said, this could be my son. And that was it. 12 months later, I sat down with my business partner and told her, I got to walk the talk. It's one thing to tell these young people that you believe in them. It's something very different to prove it. And so I walked away from my partnership because I wanted the kids to know that I was all in. I was betting everything on them. Fast forward, January of 2015, Café Momentum Dallas is listed as one of the most anticipated restaurant openings of 2015. We're on a 3-month wait to get in our restaurant. And yet everybody that walks by me and they go, you know, food's really good. And I just remember thinking, what the hell? Like, I'm awful at a lot of things, but I know how to cook. What do you mean the food's really good? And I realized 3.5 years of pop-up dinners, most anticipated restaurant opening, and still this is what the community said about our kids. It was 3 months later that Dallas Morning News food critic Leslie Brenner came in to review our restaurant. And for those of you that don't know Leslie, good on you. All you need to know is her national reputation is that she hates every restaurant that she goes to review. The benefit for us is that she reviewed us as a restaurant. She didn't care about the charity. And in her review, she wrote, on any given night, we can go toe-to-toe with the best restaurants in the city. And in a blink of an eye, it changed the city's perception on who our kids were and what they were capable of immediately. As we've continued to grow over 10 and a half years, we've opened locations in Pittsburgh in 2023. We opened in Atlanta earlier this year, and we'll open in Denver next year. And while it's exciting to think that we're opening and scaling Café Momentums, it's not really the restaurant or the program that we're scaling. It's the conversation in the community. It's the conversation that happens between the young people who are in our program that come in and are working in the restaurant at night and the guests that are coming in to dine. And the conversation goes a little like this. 3 weeks ago, I was in Atlanta, and I was having dinner with a friend of mine at Café Momentum Atlanta. His name is Jeremiah. His street name is OG Big Red. He's got a very colorful history in the city of Atlanta. And we're having dinner. And there's a large group of attorneys. Somehow I surround myself with them. Not recommended, but valued. And they're having dinner. And Jeremiah and I are sitting there talking, and I explained to him that the young people we work with, no matter what city they come from, they don't leave their neighborhood, and it's the world that they know that exists. And when they come to Café Momentum, they're not just leaving their neighborhood, they're coming into a new space, and they're meeting people from all over the community at large. And over time, what ends up happening is they begin to see themselves as a welcome member of this larger community, a bigger network, and greater resource. And that may be the most empowering thing that happens at Café Momentum for them. But on the other side is a guest that's coming in and is dining, and they don't know a single thing about the young person that's serving their meal or cooking their meal or bussing their table or pouring their water. But by dining at Café Momentum, they're put in a place where they do get to learn, where they get to see them walk in their greatness, where the call to action is for them to advocate for the trajectory of this young person's life, because it matters and it's important to them. So Jeremiah and I are sitting at dinner, and we're having this exact conversation back and forth, talking about it. And this gentleman gets up from the table of the lawyers, and he comes barreling over to Jeremiah and I, and he's literally, like bouncing up and down like a child. Where's Jamal? Where's Jamal? I've got to talk to Jamal. I've got to see him. He did such an incredible job. He's such an amazing human being. Where is Jamal? I'm like, sir, you got this. We'll find Jamal. This will be great. So working with our managers, we find Jamal. This man's getting ready to leave. Jamal goes and seeks him out. They have this moment together. Jamal's walking back. Jeremiah pulls him aside and says, Jamal, did that man tell you good job? Jamal can't even look at us. He did. Yes, sir. Yeah. He is so proud. He's so happy. He's so confident that he can't even look at us. Jeremiah says, Jamal, how'd that feel? It was good. It was good. He's just smiling ear to ear. And then Jeremiah asks him, Jamal, where do you stay? He said, I stay in Castleberry Hills. He said, where in Castleberry Hills? That's where I'm from. He says, you know the Texaco? He says, yep. He said, you stay in those apartments behind the Texaco? Jamal says, yep. He says, I know those apartments well. And they carry on this conversation, and then Jamal leaves, and Jeremiah looks at me and says, you need to know something. That Texaco is ground zero for every awful thing that happens in this city, and those apartments by proximate location is a war zone. And the fact that this child is walking away from there and coming in here and seeing a whole different world, I can't tell you what that means to me and what it means to him. And I said to him, thank you, but now let me tell you about the gentleman that came over here and wanted to praise Jamal. He said, okay. I said, do you know who that gentleman is? He said, no. I said, okay, that gentleman is general counsel for Koch Industries. And I said, do you understand the transaction that happened here tonight? It was a human transaction. It was one in which Jamal felt seen, and it was one in which this gentleman saw exactly who Jamal is and what he's capable of when given the access and opportunity to walk in his greatness. I thank you all very much for allowing me the opportunity to be here today. I say this over and over, and I mean it with all sincerity. The fact that you as a community are thinking about and investing in and strategizing around opportunities and ideas for those in your own community is incredible, it's impactful, and it affects more than just your own community. It's a model for what other communities can and should do to support everyone as a community as a whole. It's the idea that communities know what's best for their own communities. Not a guy from Dallas, Texas telling you what to do in Grand Rapids, Michigan, but a guy from Grand Rapids, Michigan and a guy from Dallas, Texas having a conversation, and the guy from Grand Rapids, Michigan goes back home and says, I've got an idea for our community.